One of the most destructive patterns in relationships is trying to control things that were never ours to control in the first place. We want our partner to speak a certain way, behave a certain way, think exactly how we think, and respond exactly how we want. And when they don't, we feel disrespected, unloved, or even betrayed. But here's the truth. Trying to control another person is the fastest way to poison love. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They said some things are up to us and some things are not. When you blur that line in love, you create endless frustration. But when you respect that line, you create peace. Think about it for a second. You cannot control your partner's mood on a bad day. You cannot control the words they choose when they're upset. You cannot control their past, their childhood, or the wounds they carry with them. You can't even control how quickly they heal or whether they choose to grow at the same pace you do. And yet, many of us spend our entire relationships trying to force those things into the mold we want. It's like trying to grab water with your hands. The harder you squeeze, the less of it you actually hold. But here's what you can control: how you respond when your partner snaps at you, how you choose to show up when the atmosphere is tense, whether you listen before defending yourself, whether you bring calm into the storm or add fuel to the fire. You can control your own words, your own tone, your own consistency. And here's the beauty of it: when you take responsibility for what you can control and let go of what you can't, you stop being a slave to frustration. You start leading with wisdom. Picture this. Your partner comes home short-tempered after a long day. Maybe they speak to you with less patience than you'd like. Your old self would jump into defense mode saying, "Don't talk to me like that. What's your problem?" And just like that, the argument spirals. Why? Because you tried to control their behavior instead of your own. But if you step back and say, "I can't control their mood right now, but I can control how I respond," everything changes. Instead of matching their heat, you bring calm. You listen, you give space, and in most cases, that simple shift diffuses tension faster than demanding they act differently. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse, neglect, or disrespect. Stoicism isn't about becoming a doormat. It's about discernment. It's about knowing the difference between what requires boundaries and what simply requires wisdom. You absolutely set standards for how you're treated, but you don't waste your energy on micromanaging every flaw or reaction in your partner. Instead, you master yourself, and in doing so, you model the kind of love that invites transformation rather than demanding it. Here's another layer: when you try to control your partner, what you're really saying is, "I don't trust you to grow. I don't trust you to be yourself. I only trust you if you do things my way." That's not love. That's fear disguised as care. But when you release what you cannot control, you give your partner the freedom to show up authentically. And love without freedom is not love at all. The Stoics lived in a brutal world: wars, betrayals, politics filled with corruption. Yet their wisdom was this: peace doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from controlling yourself. Apply that to love and you realize the same truth. Your partner is their own person with their own will, their own path. You don't own them. You only own your choices and how you engage with them. And often, the most powerful influence you can have is not in forcing change, but in embodying it. Think about when you've been on the other side. Have you ever had someone constantly nitpick you, trying to mold you into their version of perfect? Did it make you want to grow? Or did it make you defensive, resentful, maybe even rebellious? Exactly. Because control suffocates love, but freedom nurtures it. When someone accepts you as you are while still holding themselves to a higher standard, it naturally inspires you to rise. So ask yourself, what am I clinging to in my relationship that I cannot actually control? Am I trying to change my partner's personality, their pace, their wounds? Or am I focusing on the only thing I truly have power over, myself? The minute you shift that focus, the weight lifts. You stop fighting battles that were never yours to win, and you start winning the battles inside your own heart. And here's the irony: the more you release control, the more influence you actually gain. Because people respect those who are calm in the storm. They admire those who don't need to dominate to feel secure. They are drawn to those who live with clarity and composure. In love, that translates to trust. Your partner begins to trust that you won't overreact, that you won't constantly police them, that you're secure enough in yourself to let them be who they are. And that trust is the soil in which love grows deepest. At the end of the day, you will never be able to control another human being, not fully, not permanently. But you will always have the ability to control yourself. And if you master that, you've already mastered the most important principle of love. Because when you lead yourself with wisdom, your relationship follows. One of the biggest mistakes we make in love is believing words more than we believe actions. We all love to hear promises, declarations, and sweet talk, and in the beginning of a relationship, those words can feel intoxicating. But over time, you realize words are cheap when they aren't backed by behavior. The Stoics taught us to test things not by what they appear to be, but by what they truly are. They didn't care about fine speeches, they cared about consistent practice. The same is true in love. It doesn't matter what someone says they'll do if they don't live it. Think about it. Anyone can say, "I'll always be there for you." But when you're sick at 2 in the morning, who actually shows up? Anyone can say, "You can trust me." But when temptation arises, who stays faithful even when no one is watching? Anyone can say, "I love you." But love isn't in the sentence. It's in the daily choices, the sacrifices, the small acts of care that don't need an audience. This principle cuts both ways. It's not just about holding others accountable, it's also about holding ourselves accountable. How many times have we said, "I'll do better, I'll listen more, I'll be patient," only to fall back into the same patterns a week later? Words may buy forgiveness for a moment, but only consistent action builds lasting trust. If you want a love life that transforms, stop being impressed with words alone. Start measuring by what actually shows up in reality. The danger of relying on words is that they can become a kind of anesthesia. They make us feel good temporarily, but they don't actually heal anything. A partner might apologize after every fight, and for a while the apology feels like progress. But if nothing changes, what has really been solved? In fact, every empty word devalues the next one. After a while, "I'm sorry," or "I'll change," carries no weight because it's been inflated with nothing behind it. The Stoics would say, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In love, that means stop explaining your change and start embodying it through consistent behavior. Let's be real. In relationships, actions are harder than words because actions demand discipline. They require sacrifice. They force you to confront your habits and make different choices day after day. Saying, "I'll be more patient" is easy. But when your partner triggers you with something small, can you actually pause, breathe, and respond calmly? Saying, "I'll make more time for you" is easy. But when work calls late or you're exhausted, do you actually choose to prioritize them? That gap between what we say and what we do is where respect is either built or destroyed. It's also why people sometimes stay in toxic relationships too long. They believe the words instead of looking at the actions. They hear, "I'll change, I'll do better, I promise," and they hold on to the picture those words paint. But meanwhile, the behavior keeps proving the opposite. And the Stoics would challenge us here, stop clinging to illusions. See reality as it is. If the actions don't align with the promises, then the promises are meaningless. Love demands truth, not illusions. Now imagine flipping this principle in a healthy way. Imagine you're in a relationship where both people live by it. Instead of trying to talk their way out of everything, each person works quietly to show consistency. Respect grows. Trust deepens. You don't have to question whether the other person is serious because you've seen them follow through again and again. That's where true security comes from in love. Not in grand speeches, not in dramatic apologies, but in the daily pattern of behavior. And here's the best part, when you value actions over words, your standards naturally rise. You no longer fall for empty promises. You no longer tolerate cycles that never change. You no longer need constant verbal reassurance because you're watching how someone shows up. And that shift protects your heart. It keeps you from wasting years in relationships, but only sound good on the surface. But let's also make this personal. What if instead of asking, "Does my partner live this way?" you start with, "Do I show my love in action? Do I consistently back up my words with behavior? Do I embody patience, kindness, and respect in the daily grind, or do I just talk about it when the moment demands?" Because at the end of the day, we can't demand from others what we refuse to demand from ourselves. If you want to attract someone whose actions match their words, be that person first. Here's something to hold on to: actions are the real language of love. Words are just subtitles. Anyone can say the right lines, but only actions reveal the truth of the story. If you want a love life built on strength, stop asking, "What are they saying?" and start asking, "What are they showing me?" And if the answer doesn't match, believe the behavior every single time. The Stoics didn't waste time on hollow speeches because they knew character is revealed in practice. Apply that to love, and you'll save yourself endless disappointment. Measure by the action, live the action, trust the action. Because when love is backed by consistent behavior, that's when it stops being fragile and starts being unshakable. One of the most important Stoic lessons you can bring into your love life is this: respond, don't react. There's a world of difference between the two. Reaction is impulsive. It's what happens when your emotions grab the steering wheel before your wisdom even has a chance to speak. Response, on the other hand, is intentional. It's the pause, the breath, the choice you make after you've actually thought about the kind of outcome you want. In relationships, that difference can mean the difference between constant conflict and lasting connection. We've all been there. Your partner says something sharp, maybe without even realizing how it landed. Instead of slowing down, you fire back. They raise their voice, so you raise yours louder. They bring up something from the past, and you launch your own list of old grievances. And within minutes, you're both saying things you don't even mean, but you can't take them back. That's reaction. And reaction almost always escalates what could have been solved with calm. Now imagine the same moment, but you choose to respond. Your partner says something sharp, you feel the sting. You feel the urge to lash out. But instead of giving that urge the wheel, you pause. You breathe, you remind yourself, I can't control their tone right now, but I can control mine. You lower your voice instead of raising it. You ask a question instead of throwing an accusation. You create space instead of crowding the conflict. What happens? The fire dies down instead of exploding. That's response. And response is where love actually has a chance to grow. The Stoics had a simple but powerful practice, the pause. Epictetus said, if someone provokes you, remember it is your judgment that provokes you. Meaning it's not the words themselves, it's what we decide those words mean. In love, this principle is gold, because most of the time we don't get hurt by the actual situation. We get hurt by the story we tell ourselves about it. If your partner forgets to call, you can react with, they don't care about me, I'm not a priority. Or you can respond with, maybe something came up. I'll ask instead of assume. That choice changes everything. Here's why this matters so much in relationships. Once a pattern of reactivity sets in, trust erodes. Your partner stops opening up because they know every mistake will be met with explosion. You stop being vulnerable because you know every misstep will trigger retaliation. Love becomes a minefield where both people are walking on eggshells. But when you build a culture of response, safety returns. Both of you know mistakes can be discussed instead of detonated. That safety is what allows intimacy to deepen. Responding doesn't mean bottling up your feelings or pretending you're not upset. It means you give yourself the space to feel them without letting them dictate your behavior. The Stoics never said emotions were bad. They said emotions were signals, not commands. Anger tells you something feels unfair. Hurt tells you something feels overlooked. Fear tells you something feels unsafe. But just because you feel it doesn't mean you have to hand it the microphone. Response says, I hear you, emotion, but I'll decide what to do with you. That's maturity. That's strength. Think about it like this. If love is a fire, then reaction is gasoline and response is water. Which one you pour in determines whether your relationship burns down or stays warm. And most of the time, it's not the big betrayals that ruin relationships. It's the small, daily reactions that pile up, the sharp words, the sarcastic tone, the slammed doors. Over time, those little explosions build walls between two people who once promised to be each other's safe place. But the opposite is also true. The small responses add up. The patient tone, the thoughtful question, the willingness to wait until you're calm before continuing. Each of those responses lays another brick in the foundation of trust. And over time, that foundation becomes unshakable. You don't have to fear every disagreement because you both know the other is committed to responding with care, not reacting with fire. Here's the challenge, though responding takes practice. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to train yourself, just like the Stoics trained their minds. Start small. The next time your partner annoys you, catch yourself before you snap. Take one breath. Count to 3. Ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? Most of the time, the outcome you want is connection, not destruction. And once you remember that, your response will naturally shift. And when you slip, because you will slip, own it. Apologize for the reaction. Don't make excuses. Just say, I reacted instead of responded, and I'm working on that. That humility itself is a powerful response. It shows your partner you're committed to growth. It models the very thing you're trying to build. If you want a love life that transforms, master this principle. Stop letting your emotions drive you to reaction. Start training yourself to pause, to breathe, to choose. Because every time you respond instead of react, you protect your love. You strengthen it. You prove that passion doesn't have to mean chaos, and conflict doesn't have to mean war. And that's the kind of wisdom the Stoics would call true strength. One of the hardest lessons in both life and love is learning how to let go of outcomes. We're wired to want control. We want the reassurance that if we do A, then B will happen. If we love deeply, we'll be loved just as deeply in return. If we give our best, our partner will never hurt us. If we plan every detail, things will go exactly as expected. But real relationships don't work like equations. They're not neat or predictable. People are free, and freedom means uncertainty. The Stoics remind us that we can't control outcomes, but we can always control our process. And that's where our peace lies. Think about how many fights in relationships come from expectations. You expect your partner to react a certain way when you open up, but they don't. You expect them to appreciate all the effort you put in, but they miss it. You expect them to handle stress the way you do, but they crumble. The disappointment you feel isn't just about what happened, it's about the outcome you were attached to. And when that outcome didn't appear, your mind translated it as rejection or failure. But what if instead of gripping the outcome so tightly, you shifted your focus to the process of loving well, communicating clearly, showing up authentically, regardless of how your partner responds in that moment. Marcus Aurelius said, do not be whirled about, but in every movement have purpose. That's the essence of process. You don't love in order to guarantee love back. You love because love is who you've chosen to be. You don't communicate calmly just to ensure your partner stays calm. You communicate calmly because that's the person you've trained yourself to become. The outcome may shift. Sometimes they'll meet you with warmth, sometimes they won't. But the process is yours to own every single time. This doesn't mean you stop caring about results or that you settle for being mistreated. Detaching from outcomes isn't about indifference. It's about freedom. It's about saying, I'll give my best to this relationship, but I won't let my sense of peace hang on something I can't control. When you think about it, most heartbreak comes not from the event itself, but from the shattering of an expectation. You imagined forever, and it ended. You imagined constant appreciation, and it was overlooked. You imagined perfection, and you got reality. If you cling too tightly to the picture in your head, you miss the beauty that might actually exist right in front of you. There's also another layer here. When you're obsessed with outcomes, you stop being present. You're always in the future. You're thinking, if I say this, will it make them love me more? If I do this, will it guarantee they won't leave? That mindset turns love into a transaction instead of a relationship. But when you anchor yourself in the process, you come back to the present. You ask, am I being kind right now? Am I listening fully? Am I acting in alignment with my values? That's where real intimacy grows, in the process of showing up moment by moment, not in manipulating outcomes. In practical terms, this could mean letting go of needing every conversation to end in perfect agreement. Sometimes the process is simply, I listened, I expressed myself clearly, I stayed calm. The outcome might be that your partner still disagrees, but that doesn't erase the integrity of your process. It could mean showing care through small acts, without keeping score. You may not always get the reaction you hoped for, but the act itself still strengthens who you are. In the long run, relationships built on process are sturdier than those built on constant outcome chasing, because processes are habits. Outcomes are accidents. The Stoics lived by the idea that virtue is the reward itself. In love, that translates to this: being patient, being kind, being honest. That is already the reward. It shapes your character. It builds your peace. It keeps you aligned with who you want to be, whether or not the world outside bends to your wishes. When you see it that way, love stops being this exhausting negotiation with fate, and it starts becoming a daily practice of wisdom. Now, of course, detaching from outcome doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy patterns. If your process is solid, you're communicating clearly, you're respecting boundaries, you're loving well, and the outcome is consistently disrespect, neglect, or betrayal, then the process might lead you to a hard decision, walking away. But even in that, you've chosen power over helplessness, because the decision wasn't about clinging to a fantasy of how things should turn out. It was about honoring the process of living with dignity. At the heart of it, this Stoic principle is about reclaiming your energy. Think about how much time gets wasted obsessing over outcomes you can't control. Will they text me back? Will they notice what I did? Will this end up in marriage? Will they always stay? That constant anxiety robs you of joy in the actual moments you do have. By focusing on the process, you reclaim that energy. You say, what's mine is how I show up. The rest will unfold however it unfolds. That shift creates peace, and peace is one of the most attractive things you can bring into love. So the next time you catch yourself clinging to a specific outcome, pause, ask yourself, what's the process I can commit to here? Instead of, I need them to respond perfectly. Ask, can I express myself with clarity and kindness? Instead of, I need them to never leave. Ask, can I show up as a partner worth staying for? Instead of, I need everything to be smooth. Ask, can I navigate the rough spots with grace? The more you live that way, the less you're tossed around by the uncontrollable, and the more grounded you feel in what's always under your control. If there's one thing that quietly destroys more relationships than anything else, it's dishonesty. And I don't just mean big lies, though those will certainly cut deep. I mean the small evasions, the half-truths, the moments when you bite your tongue because you're afraid of conflict, or you tell your partner what you think they want to hear instead of what's really on your heart. Over time, those little cracks build walls. They chip away at trust. And once trust erodes, love doesn't feel safe anymore. The Stoics believed that a good life was one aligned with truth, and in love, that means practicing radical honesty, but with compassion. Radical honesty isn't about brutal bluntness. It's not about tearing someone down under the excuse of, I'm just being real. No, that's cruelty dressed up as virtue. Real honesty, when rooted in compassion, is about speaking the truth because you value the relationship too much to let it be built on illusions. It's about saying the hard thing in a way that still honors the dignity of the other person. It's not easy, but it's one of the greatest gifts you can give in love. Think about it. What kind of relationship do you actually want? One where you're constantly pretending, walking on eggshells, hoping the other person doesn't discover what you really feel, or one where you can put your whole heart on the table and know it will be met, even if imperfectly. Stoicism teaches us that living in truth is the path to peace, and peace in love doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from knowing you don't have to wear a mask. Now, here's the catch: honesty without compassion can crush someone. For example, telling your partner, "You always disappoint me," may feel like the truth in the heat of anger, but it isn't the whole truth, and it's not compassionate. A Stoic approach would sound more like, "When this happened, I felt hurt and overlooked. I need us to work on that." Notice the difference. One attacks their character, the other reveals your heart. The first creates defensiveness, the second creates connection. Radical honesty isn't just about the content of what you say, it's about the intention behind it. If the intention is to win, to punish, or to shame, then it's not Stoic honesty. If the intention is to heal, to clarify, to invite growth, then you're practicing the principle the right way. This also means you can't hide behind silence. Silence might feel safe in the moment, but in the long run it creates distance. You swallow your feelings, you pretend it's fine, and slowly resentment builds up like poison in the system. By the time it spills out, it's explosive. Stoic wisdom reminds us what you avoid addressing only grows heavier. So speak, but speak wisely. Speak in a way that builds, not burns. There's another side to this: receiving honesty. If you want a love that thrives, you can't just dish out honesty and expect applause. You've got to be willing to hear it too, and that's where compassion flows both ways. When your partner tells you something difficult, you don't immediately snap back or defend. You breathe, you listen, and you ask yourself, is there truth here I need to sit with? That kind of mutual honesty, given and received with grace, is the soil where real intimacy grows. Let's bring this down to daily life. Maybe you're frustrated because your partner keeps dismissing your ideas. Radical honesty means you don't just roll your eyes and stew in silence. You say, "When my ideas are brushed off, I feel small. I want to feel like an equal in this relationship." Notice again, that's honest, but it's not cruel. Or maybe you're struggling with attraction fading. Brutal honesty would be cruel in how it's delivered. Compassionate honesty would sound like, "I'm noticing a distance between us, and I want to work on rebuilding the spark." That's vulnerability, not venom. The Stoics understood that love built on deception isn't really love. If someone only loves the mask you wear, they don't actually love you. And if you only ever hear what makes you comfortable, you never actually grow. Radical honesty with compassion ensures that both people are known and both people are challenged. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also liberating. You no longer have to waste energy hiding. You no longer live in fear of being found out. You stand in truth, and that's a position of strength. And let's be clear, honesty doesn't always lead to happy outcomes. Sometimes, speaking the truth might reveal incompatibility. Sometimes it might lead to a breakup. But the alternative, living in a relationship built on illusions, is far worse. Because at least with honesty, you know where you stand, and more often than not, compassion softens the blow enough that truth doesn't end things. It strengthens them. It invites both of you to stop pretending and start building something real. At the end of the day, radical honesty with compassion is about respect. Respect for yourself because you refuse to hide who you are. Respect for your partner because you trust them enough to give them the truth. And respect for the relationship because you're choosing depth over comfort. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. And the Stoics would tell us, if you want love that lasts, don't settle for masks. Build on truth, speak with compassion. That's where real love begins and where it endures. At the end of the day, every relationship you build will rise or fall on the foundation you choose to lay. You can build it on passion, but passion fades. You can build it on attraction, but attraction changes. You can build it on convenience, but convenience doesn't last. The Stoics believed that the only foundation worth trusting was virtue. Things like respect, fairness, courage, integrity, self-control. They argued that everything else is unstable. And when it comes to love, the same is true. A love guided by virtue doesn't get tossed around by every storm. It holds steady because it's anchored to something deeper than feelings. Let's talk about respect. You can't claim to love someone you don't respect. Respect is more than politeness. It's about seeing the other person as equal in value. It's choosing not to belittle, not to demean, not to manipulate. When respect is at the core, disagreements don't become wars. They become opportunities to learn. Respect means you don't talk to your partner in ways you wouldn't tolerate from anyone else. It means you give them the same courtesy you'd give a stranger on the street, but multiplied with the intimacy and care they deserve as your partner. That virtue alone transforms the atmosphere of a relationship. Fairness is another one. So often relationships become scoreboards. I did this, so you owe me that. But fairness guided by virtue is different. It doesn't keep score. It says, I'll carry the weight when you can't, and I trust you'll do the same for me. It doesn't mean everything is split down the middle every single time, but it does mean that both people feel the scales balance out over the long run. When you have fairness, resentment doesn't have much room to grow. Then there's courage. And yes, courage belongs in love. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. It takes courage to have the hard conversations rather than hiding behind silence. A relationship without courage will get stuck in avoidance, avoiding truth, avoiding conflict, avoiding growth. But a relationship rooted in courage leans into those difficult moments, trusting that honesty and connection are worth the risk. And we can't forget integrity. Integrity means your words and actions line up. It's being the same person in private as you are in public. It's following through on what you promise. Integrity in love builds trust, and trust is the oxygen of a relationship. Without it, everything suffocates. With it, you can weather almost anything. Integrity doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're consistent. And consistency over time makes love feel safe. Self-control is another virtue the Stoics prized. And if you've ever been in a heated argument, you know why it matters. Self-control means you don't let anger drive the conversation. It means you don't weaponize your partner's weaknesses against them. It means you pause before speaking words you can't take back. Think about it. How many relationships would still be alive if both people had practiced just a little more self-control in their hardest moments? The Stoics knew that emotions are natural, but indulging them without restraint can destroy everything you've worked to build. Self-control preserves love in the heat of conflict. When virtue guides love, the relationship stops being about, how do I get my needs met? And starts being about, how do I become the kind of person worth loving? That's a shift from selfishness to responsibility. Instead of demanding that your partner constantly adjust to you, you focus on adjusting yourself to a higher standard. And when both people live that way, love doesn't just survive, it flourishes. Now, here's something important. Virtue-guided love doesn't guarantee you'll never face heartbreak. You can live with integrity, respect, fairness, courage, and still have a relationship end. But what it does guarantee is that you won't lose yourself in the process. You'll walk away knowing you lived with honor, and that's the part you can carry with you into every future relationship. You'll also attract a different kind of love, because people who live by virtue tend to draw others who value the same. Virtue is like the compass that keeps you steady when feelings go wild, because feelings will change. There will be days you don't feel the spark. There will be times you don't feel as connected. But virtue reminds you that love isn't just an emotion you fall into, it's a choice you practice daily. And those choices, small acts of respect, fairness, honesty, courage, those are the bricks that build something lasting. So when you think about your love life, ask yourself, what's guiding it? Is it impulse or is it virtue? Are you building on shifting sand or on solid ground? Because one will keep you chasing momentary highs, and the other will give you the strength to withstand storms. And if you want love that not only excites you but sustains you, let virtue be the guide. The Stoics knew that all the externals in life are fragile: health, wealth, beauty, status, but character endures. And when character guides love, love becomes something more than just a feeling. It becomes a partnership built to last. When you step back and look at all of this, the truth is simple. Love is not just an emotion, it's a practice. The Stoics weren't writing about dating apps or modern romance, but they understood people. They understood that without wisdom, our emotions run wild and our relationships crumble. These 7 principles aren't just old philosophy, they are tools. Tools to help you stop trying to control what you can't. Tools to remind you to value actions over empty promises. Tools that teach you how to respond instead of react, to focus on the process instead of clinging to outcomes, to speak truth with compassion, and to anchor your love in virtue that never fades. If you live by these principles, you won't just transform your love life, you'll transform yourself, because the truth is, healthy love doesn't come from finding the perfect person. It comes from becoming the kind of person who can love wisely, calmly, and with strength. And when you do that, you stop chasing chaos and start building connection. You stop fearing loss and start embracing presence. You stop playing games and start living with authenticity. So here's the challenge. Don't just listen to these principles, practice them. In your next conversation, in your next conflict, in the small daily moments where love is tested, choose the Stoic path. Choose patience over anger, truth over silence, character over impulse. Because at the end of the day, anyone can fall in love, but not everyone knows how to stay in love. And if you want a love that lasts, a love that deepens, a love that brings peace instead of pain, let wisdom, not impulse, lead the way.